Hi, blessings to you, and thanks for tuning in with me here on Faith Talk. My name is Jasmine Elise French, and on this edition, I had the pleasure and honor of connecting with veteran Reverend Michael Throndset this year. During our conversation, we discussed his life growing up in foster care and how he was later led into the military. Now, with Reverend Throndset in a new place in life and in ministry, he's been moved to share all of the many wonders God has performed in his life. Stick around and listen to our awesome conversation.
I was 5 years old. I was with my adopted parents, and my mother had kicked me down a flight of stairs, and I probably should have died, and I didn't. And it seemed like the following week we were in church, and I can remember hearing the minister talking about Jesus and about how much he loved us and that he had died for us. And I didn't understand how somebody I couldn't see would love me so much that he would die for me when the person I could see wanted to kill me.
Right.
And so I ran up right to the altar when they gave the altar call. And that's when I gave my life to the Lord, right then and there.
Wow, as a child.
As a child. I was 5 years old.
That is awesome. And how about life growing up for you? What was life like in school? I mean, of course, at home, but how did these experiences, influence self-image?
When I was growing up, going through all the abuse that I went through, you have no self-esteem. It's just survive day in and day out. I mean, every day was wake up and stay clear. That's the easiest way to say it, trying to stay out of my mom's way, not be in her eyesight, or, and even when I wasn't, school was easy for me. That was the easy part as far as my grades. But because I was beat on so bad at home, when I went to school, my self-esteem was so low that anybody looked at me wrong or said something to me wrong, we were fighting. Because that anger I couldn't show at home, I had to get vented somewhere, and I would vent it at school.
Okay. And how would you say those experiences you had at home, how did it affect how you dealt with socializing in school or any?
I was pretty withdrawn.
Okay.
I played football for a year, but for the most part I stayed out of the limelight. And then I discovered, drugs and people that hung around them, and so they seemed to accept me because nobody else seemed to. And so since I seemed somewhat accepted in that group, that's kind of who I hung out with.
Okay.
And then that's pretty much where I stayed. I went to 5 different high schools.
Okay.
So really you didn't get settled in too much, and then you were going on to another one, and then by the time you made new friends, you was off to another school.
Okay. How did you take time to get out of that? What were your steps that you took to get out of that situation, or different situations you had with people that you hung out with? What was that like?
When I was 15, I left home. I ran away from home to get away from the abuse. And I got caught, obviously, and they put me into a foster home.
Okay.
And through a long series of events, but I ended up in this foster home. And I got introduced to the faith, or the church that I go to now. Not the same church, but it's the same kind of church. And I had started learning about God all over again. I mean, I'd always believed, and I'd read the Bible, cover to cover, but it really took on a whole new meaning to me. And a lot of the things that I felt like I was missing, or that I didn't know, or trying to understand why what happened, it seemed like it made more sense when I was in church.
Okay. So what about now? If you were to put yourself in front of a mirror and in it you've seen your childhood self, what advice would you give him?
Good question. When I was 9, my mother had read a book on the Antichrist. And she hated me so much, she looked at me and she said she thought I was the Antichrist. And I got so traumatized by that I spent 2.5 hours in a mirror in the bathroom crying my eyes out, looking to find this symbol on my head. And it traumatized me. And if I were to give myself advice back into that mirror, I would say, it's okay. No matter what you're going through, God has a plan.
He does.
And He's going to work that plan. And it hurts right now. And you're confused and you're scared and you're alone. But He's always there. And He's always going to be there.
Absolutely. And that's the awesome thing about God. When we're going through something, we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but He's the light.
Amen.
Yeah. And tell me a bit about what led you to your church home at Harvest Fellowship of Romeo. What is it that you enjoy most about fellowship?
My wife and I had gone through some tough times, and we both decided that if we were going to continue our lives together, that we needed to find a home church.
Okay.
She was raised in one denomination, and I, of course, raised in a different one. And we agreed that it wasn't going to be enough for me to be in hers, so we would try and find a church closer to what I was used to growing up. And ironically, Harvest Fellowship, we went there on a day that was an ice storm. And we went to the building where they were supposed to be at, and they weren't there. They had to move to a different location because there was no power. And we drove through the ice again to get to this new location. And we went there, and it was okay. We liked it. We had gone to several churches trying to find the right fit. And then we left there, and we decided that we were going to give all these churches a second chance and go again. And we did. And the second time we went, we knew we were supposed to be there. What an amazing journey it's been. That was almost 16 years ago.
Wow.
And it's been an amazing time. It's changed our lives. It's improved our lives. Our marriage has gotten better. Our relationship with our children has gotten better. Our work relationships have gotten better. We've seen miracles after miracles after miracles, and I'm using miracles because there's been so many of them I really can't put a number to it. And God has blessed us mightily. When we first started going to church there, we were struggling so bad.
Okay.
Everything, we were living check to check. And by walking this life of faith together and just living it day by day by day, and not just reading the Word, but speaking it and using it in our daily walk, this made such a difference. And I can't place how much you need a church family around you. When we went through trials and tribulations, we had our church family there, and that's changed our lives for the better.
Okay. Well, speaking of churches and church families, what do you believe it is across the board that divides churches?
I think people wanting to believe their way, afraid of really, they want to hear a message preached their way and not the way it was intended. I think churches are too seeker-friendly. They're trying to just fill the pews up rather than really ministering to the people.
Okay.
And one of the things that I teach on is about the book of Acts, and that the end-time church needs to be like the beginning church rather than some of the churches you see today.
Okay. So when did you hear a word from God leading you into ministry?
My wife and I were having a disagreement. And she looked at me and she said, "How can you know all this about God and still act this way?" And in that moment, I knew that I had to change. I needed to change my life around. and that there was a calling on my life and I needed to pursue it, and that I'd run away from it for too long, and that it was that time. And so I did.
And so you did. And look at you now.
You know, grace. That's my life. You know, if there's one word to describe my life of being here and surviving my life, would be grace.
What would you tell someone who knows they received that calling, that word from God telling them, go into ministry, this is what I'm calling you to do, and they're a little scared or hesitant?
I think the first thing I would tell them is to get by myself for a little while. Take your Bible, take some teaching tapes, take some music, and really just listen.
Okay.
When you pray, the problem with most Christians is that it's kind of like this. It's like me calling you on the phone and asking you a question, and before you could answer it, I hung up. Okay? And that's the definition of most Christians' prayer life. They do this. They'll pray a prayer and then they just negate it right away, or they don't wait for an answer. And if he's your Father in heaven, no different than your earthly father, if you ask him a question, wouldn't it be smarter to wait for an answer? And if God's really called you, then he confirms his word with signs and wonders.
Okay.
And there will always be a confirmation to it. And if you ask, you'll get one.
Trauma affects us all in ways that are deeper than we can even imagine. So how has this journey shaped the way you form relationships in your adult life?
Instead of not trusting people or trying to stay away from them, I think I spend more time listening.
Okay.
And really wanting to be there for them, for people. Growing up like I did, you drew back from people, or you waited for them to walk away, or you waited for them to hurt you somehow, and you were always expecting it. Walking by faith is just the exact opposite. You're looking for opportunities to be a help to them, or just an encouragement to them, maybe with a word, a smile, or a hug, but somehow encourage them.
Okay, awesome. So you served in the U.S. military from 1984 to 1997.
Yes.
What did the decision to serve this country mean to you at heart?
When I joined the Army, I was in a foster home. And I was going to get released from the foster home before I graduated high school. And so I was going to have to go live on welfare and try and find my own place and live by myself. And I scored in the top 1% of the country on the ASVAB test. So the military said, well, pick a job. So I picked the hardest one I could find. I thought if I joined the service, if I wore the uniform, then people would respect me. And I thought maybe then I would find value.
Okay. So what is it that you want the world to know about the difficulties veterans face and how to get through those difficulties?
Well, when it comes to the military, one thing they don't realize is that when you're in a battle zone, or excuse me, a war zone, what you don't realize is that these men and women are on edge 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of that year. They're always on edge. They're always looking around. They're always looking over their shoulder. It's like, the only way to describe it would be like walking the edge of a razor. Okay, it's a very thin line. Your nerves, you're tense all the time. You're always trying to expect the unexpected. You don't know what to expect. And when you come home from that, the tension's gone. You're so used to living this adrenaline rush for so long that to come down from that, it's confusing. And a lot of veterans don't know how to adjust to that. A lot of times they'll give you a class when you go to get out.
Okay.
To try and help you get through that. But most veterans, it's difficult. And then they get around civilian life and they don't understand why people do the things they do. It makes no sense. There's no routine to it. It's a mess. And it's confusing. And it takes a while for them to adjust to it. And when you come back in the civilian life, civilians look at them like there's something wrong with them. And they don't understand why they're so tense or why they're so jumpy. It's because they're used to being this way.
What did you do to readjust?
My faith in God, I was never in battle.
Okay.
So that's a big difference.
Okay.
But for me, even in some of the things I've seen, what you do is you rely on your faith. And you really dig in deep to it. Because it's the only way it makes any sense. You know, the world's going to tell you one story. But the more that you hear that story, the more you realize it's not true. And you want truth. And the only truth that I've ever found that's never changed is God's Word.
And that's something that we have to aggressively look for. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
You have to seek Him. So, were you ever placed in a position to minister to someone who had the same experiences you had growing up? And if so, what was that like for you spiritually?
Helped me. It really helped me.
Okay.
Because my life as a child was so bad, it seemed like a bad horror movie. And parts of it would get buried away. It was years. I was married and had children. And I had gone back to church for a while. And in that time, I had, it seemed like little videos going off in my head. And the events that I had forgotten about some of the abuse had come back. And it was traumatic. It was very difficult for me. But prayer and letting God and then letting other people minister to me, and instead of trying to do it on my own, instead of trying to think, well, I'm a big guy or I'm a soldier, I can handle this, and I realized that I couldn't do it all on my own, and I had to trust in God, and I had to know that He knew I had value.
Sometimes we often think that there's a specific way we're supposed to pray or talk to God. But can you go into greater detail about what it really means to pray that some people may not even realize?
The word prayer literally means the desire of one's heart. And a lot of people want to pray, and they want to pray religiously, or they want to pray something long, drawn out, trying to make themselves sound holier. And those prayers get ignored. I mean, no one really, it's God's like, okay, all right, are you done yet? You know. But when you stop and think about it, real prayer is right from the heart. And you're calling out. It's a conversation. It's a, Lord, I don't know what to do, and you know what? You do know what to do. And like I like to tell people in Ecclesiastes, it says there's nothing new under the sun. And that brings me such comfort when I pray, because I know that whatever I'm praying about, someone in history has already gone through this before. They've already conquered it, and God's already given them the answer for it. So I have that comfort that no matter what I pray, there's an answer for it. And I just have to wait and receive it.
Absolutely. It's already done.
It's already done.
And it's written.
It is written.
So what do you find in ministry that is the most challenging for you?
People that go to college and they suddenly think that they understand everything and everything about life. Science. They think that science and the Bible are taboo, and that's totally wrong. They think that history changes, or that you can go back and change history by changing the words in textbooks. That's totally wrong. They think that God's Word was for a time period back then, but not for now. I think those are the people that are hardest to reach, because you almost have to let them, you have to have a lot of patience, a lot of understanding, and try to find common ground with them. But they're still the most difficult people to minister to.
I think so. So what is your favorite part about ministry?
Watching people get it. When something that you're sharing with them resonates in their spirit, and you can almost see like a light bulb go off in them, and I get so excited because I know they got it. Or like I've seen many physical healings, many miracles. And in that moment when somebody's life changes, that second that their life changes for the better, you never forget those moments, and such joy it brings to you. It is an honor to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the sermon this week, I had preached about some Bible basics from Genesis to Revelation, trying to get people to understand it or see it as a whole instead of just in parts. And I had one person write to me afterwards, and he sent me an email, and I had shared part of my testimony about family and how important that our spiritual genealogy goes all the way back to Genesis. And I tied all this together, and she really felt it helped her understand a lot of what she went through, and she could relate to some of the stories that I told, and it made her feel better about where she had come from and where she was going. And that was a true blessing.
Okay. So when we talk about Ephesians 6,
Yes.
particularly 10 through 11, it tells us to be strong in the Lord and the power of his might, put on the full armor of God so that we can stand against the wiles of the enemy.
Right.
So why do you think we may forget that we need to put on the full armor of God when we face tribulation?
Because we don't realize that the enemy attacks us one way for one piece of armor, and if he doesn't get to you through that armor, he'll go to another piece of armor and try and hit you from that point. And if you look at the armor itself, for every piece of armor that we're given in that chapter, that's how the enemy is going to come at you. If he can't get you through your your helmet of salvation, he's going to come at you with the breastplate of righteousness and try and get you to believe you're not that way. And from a military standpoint, if I don't use all my armor, if my weapons aren't correct, if I'm not having full use of all my weapons or all of my armor, then I'm vulnerable. And I'm going to that's where they're going to find me. That's where I'm going to lose it. That's where I'm going to be the most easy target to get to. And that's what Christians don't realize, that full armor of God is meant to help them against all the wiles of the devil, not just some, but all.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I needed that. That was awesome. So it's evident that God blessed you with a loving family, wife, children, grandchildren. After everything God has brought you through, how do you reflect on the hardships you've had growing up and even currently, and still can fully experience the joys that you have now?
If I didn't go through what I went through, I ask myself, would I appreciate as much where I'm at now? Because coming from what I've come from is an absolute miracle. To be talking to you right now is an absolute miracle. For me, that tells a huge story, and it's a total symbol of the grace of God. You know, when Jesus said, "I'll never leave you nor forsake you," growing up, I wondered, I questioned it, and I called him out on it. And now I look back on it and I realize he never did leave me. He never forsook me. And even when I didn't think he was there, he was there. And now I look back on it and I just smile and I say, okay, Lord, I got you. You were right. And it gives me that extra, I think, the extra faith to want to go further, to go deeper, to know more. There's always one more person to pray with. There's always one more person to share the word with. There's always one more victory. And as long as I'm here, I'm going to keep finding all the victories I can find. You know, it heals those wounds, but it encourages you to go further than you ever thought you could, and to see more people get blessed.
And this is a blessing, and I thank God that you're still here and that you're able to minister to me and everyone else out there. I appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you very much.
I do have a gift for you.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah, this is for you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah, I thought you would really like that book.
Well, you know, it's the part I like the best about it, too, is that our family's all military.
Awesome.
You know, and so, yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.